Okay. Hello everyone. Nice to see you all. Thank you again, Hyperspace. Really, I really appreciate it. Great, amazing. Thank you. And I'm happy I can be helpful. Cheers, man poyo. Cheers. All right, I think we can start. Oh, what do you say? What do you say? It's a weird time today. Not the usual live stream schedule, but nevertheless, one of the ADSR is not connected. Yeah, this can be. Things happen. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining. I haven't streamed in like a month, I guess, or something, and I feel like it's all new for me. But we are here to have fun, and that's the most important. And I have my water. Okay, so we can start. Jonathan, hi. Joe, hi. Boaz, good Shabbos. Hello, everyone. Today we have another beginner-friendly live stream. I hope you can hear me. I hope everything is okay. Which means that, first of all, it will not be so... I will keep it quite simple, I guess, the patch. Also today we have, we will build a subtractive patch together, a subtractive synth. Have a look. A subtractive synth, which is a perfect way, not a perfect way, but a really good way to learn the basics, oscillators, VCAs, envelopes, LFOs, and so on. Right, and I will, because it's beginner friendly, I will spend a bit more time. Hi Kyle, hi Didymos, that's a nice name. I will spend more time explaining things, so bear with me if you are advanced and this is boring for you. I'm sorry. But again, this is beginner friendly, which means that I will spend a bit more time explaining stuff, or I don't know, explaining, maybe it's not the right word, but telling stories about the modules. All right, cool. So let's start. We want to build a subtractive voice. What is a subtractive voice? Chat, come on, let's do this together. What does it mean, a subtractive synth or a subtractive voice? What does it mean? What are we focusing on? Where is our focus when we build a subtractive voice or synth? I'm waiting for you. Thanks again for joining, everyone. Okay. I'm still waiting. Jonathan, someone, what are we focusing on when we speak about, or when we want to build a subtractive synth? So, Aralfoni say filters. Starting off with something, then taking away something. So again, rich harmonics, then filter, harmonics to filter, complex filtering out. So exactly, so we start with something, I hope I'm not screaming, I'm not yelling in the microphone. We start with something complex or rich, and soon we will see also rich in what and in what way it's complex, and then we subtract from it. And this is amazing. And one of a common way to subtract what we are going to subtract, and I will show you this in a second, is using a filter. A low pass filter, a high pass filter, a band pass filter to subtract what we will subtract. So let's start with a common module that we can start with, and that's a VCO. I will try also to use but mostly just the VCV modules, although they will change as far as I understood it. They will they will look different in the next version, but still I will use them. So we will start with a VCO, with a voltage controlled oscillator. Again, excuse me if you are advanced and this is boring for you because I'm explaining everything. I'm sorry, but bear with me. Right, so we start with a voltage controlled oscillator. So first of all, let's concentrate on the oscillator part. An oscillator What it will do, it will generate oscillations. Oscillations are movement back and forth that have a certain frequency, a certain rate. So if, for example, we have a look on the sine wave here on the scope, we can see that we have a repetitive movement back and forth, right? And this is an oscillation. And according to the frequency of the oscillation, to the rate of the oscillation, we will get also pitch. Would using an ADSR for volume also count for subtractive synthesis? Not really. What we are subtracting is harmonic content, is overtones. I will show you this in a second. Right, but let's concentrate on the oscillator. So the oscillator part is a module that will generate oscillations. Most of the time we use it as our sound source, right? We can also listen to this if I connect it to the output. I hope you can hear everything. Right, so we have now a sine wave oscillation. We have different waveforms we can choose from, but we have also the VC part, which is the voltage control part, which stands, which means that we can not only have an oscillation, generate oscillations, we can also control them with voltage in all sorts of ways, modulate the waveform, modulate the frequency, and so on. Right, so now let's have a look at spectrum analyzer, which will show us the harmonic content of the signals. And let me change this from analog to digital, just so we have something a bit cleaner. Right, so a sine wave, again, we will listen to it. Right, so as we can see, a sine wave is a pretty simple waveform, a pure waveform. We have only one harmonic, which is the fundamental. Right, we have just the pitch. In this case, it's a C. I don't know why it says A here. Right, but it's about 280 hertz, which means that this sine wave is oscillating. It's repeating itself 280 times in a second, which is quite amazing, and it will give us a certain pitch. I can change the frequency, I can change the rate of oscillation, and this will change the pitch as well. And this is something important to remember, that frequency is pitch and pitch is frequency. You can see that now on the spectrum analyzer, this is something similar to an equalizer if you are working with an equalizer in your DAW or whatever. Right, we can see the frequency of this oscillation, and it has a certain pitch. When I change the pitch, I change the frequency. When I change the frequency, I change the pitch. This is something important to understand in modular, that frequency is pitch. Now, if we look and listen to a triangle wave, you will see that already we have more what's called harmonics or overtones. And you can also hear that the sound is brighter. Right, and basically the more sharp or edgy the waveform is, the more overtones or harmonics it will have. Right, if we have a look, and I will take the level down for this one because it can get quite loud. Yeah, all right, so A channel, cool. Okay, so if we have a look at something like a sawtooth wave, and you can see that it's very sharp, right? It's very bright, and it has many overtones or harmonics. Alphony, I will get to it in a second. We will speak about volt per octave and FM actually also in this stream, but I will get back to you with this. Right, so we have a much sharper, you can see this on the scope, we have a much sharper waveform, many more overtones and harmonics, and the sound is much brighter. The same with the square wave, it's also very bright. Right, so this is what we will subtract. Usually in a subtractive voice, subtractive synthesis, we start with something that is rich in harmonics, rich in overtones, something like a saw wave or a square wave, sometimes also a triangle wave. And we use a filter to subtract harmonics and overtones from this voice. This is the basics of subtractive synthesis, and there are other aspects that we will see also in this stream. So we said that we are using a filter. Now, before we move on to the filter, let me just answer this. What's the difference between volt per octave and FM? Both are changing frequency. Both are frequency modulation. FM stands for frequency modulation. I will get into this more in depth later. FM stands for frequency modulation. Frequency is pitch. When you modulate the frequency, you change the pitch as well. Actually, on this oscillator, on the VCO1 and on other oscillators as well, not all, but many others, the FM input and the volt per octave input are exactly the same. The only difference is that the FM input has a built-in attenuation. So basically, if you have the attenuator of the FMCV all the way up, the FM input and the volt per octave input will work exactly the same because this FM is exponential. Never mind now what it means, but exponential FM and volt per octave basically are one and the same. And this is exactly the thing with the VCO2, for example. The VCO2, as you can see, has no volt per octave input, but it has an FM input. And again, if we open the attenuator all the way up, the FM input will work exactly, will track exactly 1 volt per octave, will work exactly like the volt per octave input. So yes, frequency modulation and volt per octave are basically more or less the same. Just that the FM usually has some sort of attenuation and volt per octave has no attenuation. Okay, so we said we start with something, I need another shlook. We said we start with something rich in overtones, rich in harmonics. This is our complex waveform, which is not so complex. Actually, it's quite normal or quite common. Again, I will come back to FM also later, I hope. So we said we are using a filter to subtract. Why did I get rid of the analyzer? I don't know. To subtract this, those overtones and harmonics, right? So if I go back to the sine wave, right? This is our sine wave. I will go through the filter. In this case, we will use a low pass filter, and I will tell you exactly what it means. A low pass filter lets the low frequencies pass, and it attenuates the frequencies above a certain point, and this point we call the cutoff point. Sometimes called also the frequency of the filter. So it will split the frequencies into two, right? The lower and the higher from this point. In this case, it's this big knob, this frequency knob. It's called the cutoff point, and it will let the low frequencies below the cutoff point pass, and will attenuate the higher frequencies. Attenuate in level, actually in volume, the higher frequencies. Sometimes people ask me why, when I use a filter, the volume of the sound also goes down. Because this is basically what a filter does. It reduces the volume, reduces the level of the frequencies above or below, depending on which filter you are using. So in this case, we use a low pass. It will let the low frequencies pass, right? And we can really hear this, and you can see this also on the analyzer. See the movement, and you can hear how it attenuates the higher frequencies, the brightness, the sound becomes less bright, becomes darker. Right, and again, this is volume, this is amplitude. So if my oscillator is quite high, again, frequency is pitch. Pitch is frequency. If the pitch is high, also its fundamental frequency will be high, and this will mean, look here, I'm moving the filter. This will mean that nothing will go through, right? Until we reach a certain point where we catch up with the oscillator. Right? So this is a low pass filter. We also have in this case a high pass filter. What a high pass will do, exactly the opposite. It will let the high frequencies pass, the frequencies above the cutoff point pass, and will attenuate. it will reduce the volume, will reduce the levels of the lower frequencies below the cutoff point. Right? Let me just take the level down here. Right? Now there's another control on a filter that is common to see. It's called the resonance. Basically, it's a feedback loop. The filter is feeding back into itself, and it creates a bump. It creates a sort of a boost of level of amplitude at the cutoff point. Right, so if I set my cutoff point to somewhere about 1200, maybe I can change this, right? So now my cutoff point is about 1200. Have a look on the analyzer. When I raise the resonance, we get a boost at around 1200, which is more or less where my cutoff point is, and I can move it. I hope everyone is okay. The chat is quite quiet. I hope you're all right, and it's not, I'm not going too fast here. And of course, feel free to ask any questions if you have. Also, if you're not catching this live and you watch this later, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments and I will be happy to try and help you out. Right, so we have the resonance control, which will create a boost at the cutoff point, and this is quite a familiar sound. Wow. 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 Right. So this is a familiar sound of a filter, of a low-pass filter with some resonance. Cheers. Cheers. Dick Maggot, I guess. Cheers. Right. So we have a complex waveform, not a complex, but a rich waveform, rich in harmonic or harmonically rich waveform. We started with a saw wave in this case, send it through a filter to subtract harmonics, to subtract the overtones, and this is the basics of subtractive synthesis. The basics of subtractive synthesis. Now there are a few more elements. So for example, what we have now, we have basically a drone. The oscillator, this is something that I really love about Modular. The oscillators are always oscillating. They always generate oscillations. Now, this is a drone, it will always be on. Right? So what, and again, I'm asking you, chat, what is a common module or a common building block of Modular we can use in order to have some control over amplitude, some control over the volume? I don't want this oscillator to just drone in the background always. I want to have some control. I want to decide when the volume will go up and when the volume will go down. Right, so what is a common tool we can use? Already we saw that we can do something like this with a filter. Again, a filter will attenuate, will reduce in level, but there is another module, another building block we can use in order to have control over amplitude. So let me know what you say. Bob, ADSR envelope. ADSR envelope, I can see why, but this is not the answer I'm looking for. This is not the answer I'm looking for. I'm looking for, Thomas, yes, I'm looking for a VCA. An envelope is something we can use to shape a volume, to shape, not a volume, to shape some sort of modulation or signal. But it's not necessarily for amplitude. What we can use to control amplitude is a VCA. Right? With the VCA, we can have control over an amplitude of a signal. I understand why you say ADSR, and it's partially correct. An envelope, because we use usually an envelope, and we'll get to this in a second. Usually we use an envelope to control a VCA, but the VCA itself is what will have control over the amplitude. Now, a VCA, this is a big subject for me because and let me ask you first of all, let me add a VCA, right? So we'll say the VCA, VCA, I'm not going to say what it stands for. We will do this in a second, right? But with a VCA, hey, thanks so much, man. Dick Mugget, thank you. I really appreciate it. It's not for granted, man. Thank you. Right, so with the VCA, we can have control over the amplitude. And let me show you this. Now I sent from the filter, I sent the signal, this audio, this oscillator through a VCA, and now I can have control over the level. Right? Now, a VCA, what it stands for, I see also used to, I see already your answer. So VC, again, like VCO and like VCF, it stands for voltage control. It means that it's not only an A, and we will get to the A in a second, it's also voltage control, which means that we can control it with voltage, and we will get to the voltage part in a second. Right, but what is used to, you already said it, but what does VCA stands for? I want more answers. VC, voltage controlled, what? What is the A? I want to know what is the A, because this is something that I think is confusing a lot of people, and that's not so cool. So what is the A all about? Voltage controlled amplifier, it's not wrong, but I want a better answer. I'm waiting, dear chat, I'm waiting. Na 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 na. Voltage controlled attenuator. Attenuator, thank you. Yes. Now, I understand. Amplification means to control a signal. Okay, wait a minute, I'm getting to it. I understand that voltage controlled amplifier is not wrong. I understand it. I understand that amplifier is not a wrong answer. I understand there are also VCAs that also really amplify a signal, and we will see this in a second. But I think that a lot or many people are confused because they call it an amplifier, amplifier is not wrong. Again, I'm saying, Joe, thank you, but amplifier is not wrong. I'm just saying that if you use a different term, if you call it an attenuator, a whole world of possibilities opens up for you. Because when you think about it as an amplifier, you will mostly use it just for volume, just for controlling volume of a signal, volume as in level, as in loudness. But if you think about it as an attenuator, you will use it in your patch in many other places that have nothing to do with volume. They have to do something with level, but not with volume. And I think many people, they don't understand. I use a lot of VCAs in my videos and in my patches and whatever. And I got this question a few times, why am I using a VCA to attenuate a modulation, for example? Because VCAs are mostly attenuators. There are also amplifiers, but they will mostly attenuate. Control a signal with a different signal. And let me show you this, right? I will show you this on the scope. So here we have the saw wave right after the filter. Right? We can see, hey, Game Boy Z, we can see the level, we can see the amplitude of this signal. Now I want to show you this. I'm just going to take the level out here. I want to show you the signal after the VCA. I'm opening the VCA all the way up. There is no, that's 100%. There is no more than this. And you can see that the signal only reaches the same amplitude as the original signal, which means that there is no amplification here. The signal is not amplified in the sense that it has more volume, more level. Right? It reaches the same level, which means that this VCA in this VCA is not really amplifying anything. Again, I'm not saying that voltage controlled amplifier is wrong. I'm just saying that thinking about it in a way, in a different way, thinking about it as an attenuator and not an amplifier opens a whole world of possibilities. So again, this will not amplify the signal. Let me show you a different VCA that will amplify the signal. And this is this mixer here. The VCV mixer is basically for VCAs that are also mixed, but they are VCAs. Right, so if I send, for example, let's do something like this. I will use another mixer just so I don't want to listen to this. I just want to show you this on the scope. Right, so I have here the signal after the filter again, and then after the VCA, right? For now, you can see that I'm on 0 dB and we have the same result. I can attenuate it, but I can also amplify it. As you can see now, the pink trace has a bigger range or a larger range than the blue trace. The blue trace is the original signal. The pink trace is the amplified signal. Amplified, right? Amplifier, amplified. Let's see the comments. Best way to think about VCA is multiplying signal, which gets you both amplification and attenuation depending on the factor you control with. For a nonlinear VCA, it would technically be multiplication anymore. I think this is a bit too complicated for, especially for beginners, to think about stuff like this. I think amplification and attenuation or a reduction in level is much more simpler to understand, I guess. I don't know. But again, it's important. This is something that is really important for me, and that I always say it's better to think about VCAs, most VCAs. Again, here I showed you an example where it will actually amplify, but mostly VCAs will attenuate. And when you understand this, you will use them much more in your patches. Okay, so now we have a way to control the amplitude of this voice, right? But again, we have the voltage. Thank you, Game Boy Z. Hi, aVCA, I guess. Right, so now we are getting to the voltage control part. Sorry, I just need another schluckle. Yeah, cool, Thomas. Thank you. Right, the voltage control. I don't want to do this all the time. Right, the levels. I don't want to change the filter with the mouse or with my hand if it's hardware. Right, everything, by the way, we go through here also works the same in hardware, right? And and I don't want to change the pitch by hand. Right, and this is where the voltage control part comes into play. Monster of East, thank you. This is an amazing point. The neutron, the Behringer neutron, it has actually two VCAs, but one of them is called the VCA and the other one is called an attenuator, and it has a CV input, which is basically an attenuator that can be voltage controlled, which is basically a VCA, voltage controlled attenuator. So on the Behringer neutron, you have two VCAs that you can use to get two voices totally independent, because you have two envelopes, two VCAs, two oscillators. Yes, so again, VCAs, think of them. I'm not saying that they are not amplifiers, can be, technically they are amplifiers, but think of them as attenuators. Thomas, okay, it's time for some LFOs. Before the LFOs, I want to start with voltage control. First of all, to control the pitch, again, the frequency of the oscillator. Cheers, Gabriela, cheers. Thank you for joining. Control the pitch, control the frequency of the oscillator, control the frequency of the filter, and control the levels. Right, we don't have to do this with the mouse or with the hands. We have voltage control or control voltage that can do this for us. This is the whole part, the whole fun part about modular, because modular, if it was no voltage control, it will be just like guitar pedals, for example. But it's more than just guitar pedals. It's better because we have voltage control. Okay, or control voltage. So I'm going to use in this case now my MIDI keyboard. Maybe later if we have time we can use also a sequencer and talk about sequencing, but in this case I'm going to use my MIDI keyboard. So I'm just going to add the MIDI module and select my MIDI keyboard, right? And now we have a few things we can do. First of all, I want to control the pitch of the oscillator. Let me just bring this back. Again, pitch is frequency. Now there is, are you suggesting Sec3? Maybe later we can get to the sequence Sec3. It's a really powerful sequencer actually. Right, so we have what's called volt per octave. Now volt per octave means basically that for each octave, change in octave, you add 1 volt. It can be, you can add positive volts or negative volts, but you always add voltage if it's positive or negative, and by that you change the frequency. Every octave is 1 volt, right? And this is in eurorack, this is in some semi-modular Arturia stuff, neutron, and stuff like this. Okay, so the let me just change. I want to keep the color coding. So red is for audio, and volt per octave or pitch information will be yellow. So now with my keyboard, I can start controlling the pitch of the oscillator. Right? And let me show you what I mean with volt per octave. By the way, I just want to mention again that there is also a link in the chat. This is mostly a part of a course that I created, the basics of modular. If you are interested, if you want to go deeper, it's like 40 something videos where each video is dedicated to a different building block, and I go much more in depth there about everything. So if you're interested, also in the description, also in the chat, there is a link. Okay, so let me show you now. Okay, with the voltmeter, right? We have here 0 volts. Now, I'm not adding positive and I'm not adding negative volts. This is the base tuning of the oscillator. And let me show you also the notes, right? And I have here also a tuner, and you can see C4. This is the main. Hey Ionica, hi, sonar scope. This is the tuning of this oscillator by default. Now if I want to go to C5, which is an octave up, I have to add 1 volt. Have a look here on the voltmeter. I added 1 volt, and on the tuner we see C5. Then we have again C4. I want to go to C3. I have to add negative 1 volt. Again, I'm adding voltage. I'm always adding, but it's negative. It goes the other way. Right? Negative 1, and we have C3. So this is just, I wanted to demonstrate this volt per octave. And now I have control over the pitch, over the frequency of the oscillator, and I can play it with my keyboard. To the filter we will come back later. Now I want to speak about the VCA. Hey Roberto, I want to speak about the VCA. How can we control the VCA? We can use all sorts of different modules. A common module, we spoke about it before. A common module, and I'm sorry if I'm going too quickly, let me know. A common module that we use to control a VCA is an envelope generator. That we have all sorts of different versions of it, but an envelope generator that we have from VCV, Mr. Detonia, hi, looks like this, right? This is an envelope generator. It will generate CV, it will generate control voltage that we can use to control, we can use to envelope, right? To limit or to change something in a shape, in a certain shape over time. In our case, we will use it to shape or to control the amplitude, the level of this voice through the VCA. Hey Pixel, Cheers, man, I'm happy. Great. Right, to shape the level amplitude, the level envelope of this voice. So I'm taking the envelope generator, modulation is green in this case, and I'm sending it to the CV input of the VCA. Again, VCA voltage controlled. In this case, I'm going to keep saying attenuator. Right, so now we need something that will tell the ADSR, tell this envelope generator how to start working, how long it should work, and so on. And a common signal we use for this, and I say again common because it's modular, you can use whatever you want. Just because it says something doesn't mean you have to use it. For example, just because it says volt per octave doesn't mean you have to use volt per octave. Just because it says gate doesn't mean you have to use gates. But a common signal we can use is a gate. So I'm going to use the gate. Gates, clocks, and triggers are blue. And I'm going to use a gate to activate or to tell this ADSR module when and how long it should work. Now let's go quickly over what is an ADSR. ADSR stands for attack, decay, sustain, and release. I'm sure you heard it already a million times, but still I'm going to say it. We have 4 stages. This is a 4-stage envelope. There are other envelopes that have different number of stages. Here we have 3 stages that relate to time. So we have attack time, decay time, and release time, and we have 1 stage that relates to amplitude or to level, and this is the sustain level. Again, attack time, decay time, release time. We change the time, right? And sustain level, we change the level. So attack, basically how long, again, time, how long it will take for the voltage, for the envelope to go from 0 to maximum. In this case, it's 10 volts. This is the attack time. Then we have decay, how long it will take from the attack time to go to the sustain level. I will show you everything in a second. Then we have the sustain level that has nothing to do with time. And we have release time, which means how long it will take for the envelope to go from the sustain level to 0, back to 0. Hey, William, you're a mushroom, you're a fun guy. Thank you. Right? Okay, so let's go again one by one. I'm going to hold a note on my keyboard. This will open a gate, and this is also something that I want to show you. It's also important. A gate basically is a binary signal. It's either at 0 or at maximum. It's either closed at 0 or open at maximum. So if I hold the key, and let me change the attack time, make it even longer. It's in milliseconds. Again, it's time. Have a look. Attack, right? How long it will take to go from 0 to maximum. Then we have decay, how long it will take the voltage to go to the sustain level. Attack, decay, right? Again, attack, decay. And now as long as I hold the key, you can see the gate is still open. This is the pink trace. The gate, again, a binary signal, either at 0 or at maximum. The gate is still open. The envelope is staying or sustaining, sustaining at the sustain stage. And then we can change here the level of the sustain stage, right? At which level it will sustain at. It can sustain also at maximum. Have a look on the VCA. You can also see this here, right? And then when I let go, how long it will take the level to go from this sustain stage back to 0. I let go, you can see the pink trace. You will see the pink trace closes going back to 0. This is the gate and the release, right? This is the release stage. So again, attack time, decay time, release time, sustain level. Are there function generators with sustain that have length and level parameters? I'm not so sure what you mean. You mean that you can control how long they will stay at the sustain and also the level? I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure. I mean, there is the hold function, but hold is basically, it will hold always at maximum. but this is something a bit more advanced, I guess. Okay, now why I say that the gate is important. Envelope generators need a gate to work, which means that they are dependent on the length of the gate. Again, if I get rid of the envelope for a second, a gate will open, will go to maximum, and will close. And this length, the length of the gate, is very important for envelope generators. And why? Because, for example, the attack time needs the gate to stay open in order to complete its stage, which means that if now the gate will not stay open long enough, the attack stage will not finish and we will not get the result we want, like this. Look at the attack, it just reached this level here, right? Even less, even less. You can see the gate is not open long enough. If I have a longer attack time, like of more than a second, right? If the gate is not open long enough, the envelope will not complete its stages. So always when you use an envelope generator, think about your gate. If your gate is open long enough, if you're using a sequencer, for example, you might bump into problems, issues that you have. Your voice will not go to maximum amplitude and you don't know why. And this might be the issue. Yeah, I guess, yeah, but he wanted also level. So not just time, but also the level. So this, I'm not so sure if it exists. Okay, so this is the envelope. Now what we have, we can change, we can control pitch, and we can control or change or have control over the amplitude, over the volume. Right, and we can change this to be nice and plucky, like I like it. Right. Right, and now we have something that is not droning, right, but rather we have control. If the gate is too narrow, does it cause blips in the sound? No, this has to do more with the attack and sometimes also the release. If the attack is really short or the release is really short, you might get all sorts of clicks and pops because the signal just moves very quickly from one point to another. Yeah. So let's have a bit more of attack, a bit sustain, right? It will take the envelope quite long to reach the sustain. So again, now we have pitch and now we have amplitude. Now I want, usually in a subtractive synth voice, we have two envelopes. We have one to control amplitude and another one to control the filter. Now an envelope generator, you don't have to use just for volume. You can use it for all sorts of things. Again, also for something like a filter, for example. Right, so I'm going to add, just to duplicate this ADSR, I'm going to use the same. Is everything until now, everything is clear? Everything is okay? Am I going too quickly, too fast, or is everything okay? I will take another schluck in the meantime. I'm running out of water. Okay, so again, usually in a subtractive synth voice or subtractive synth, we have two envelopes, one to control the amplitude, another one to control the filter. So I'm going to use the same gate because I want both envelopes to work at the same time. And I'm going to send the CV output from the envelope to the CV input of the frequency of the filter. Again, the frequency is the cutoff point where the filter starts to cut off the frequencies if it's highs or lows. Cheers Joe, highs or lows, depending on if it's a low pass or a high pass filter. Right, and now we reach to an interesting point where we have an attenuverter. Right, we spoke about attenuation with the VCA, but now we have attenuversion. We have an attenuverter that will not only allow us to attenuate a signal, but we can also invert it. William, again, this stream will be also available later on. It will stay on the channel. So if you need to go back, feel free. And also, if you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments. You can email me if you want. If you have any questions, I can always try and help you out. Right, so we have an attenuverter. Now, how do you recognize usually attenuverters? Is when the 0 point is at the center, right? Which means that you can either go right or go left. This usually means when the 0 point is in the center, usually it means that it's an attenuverter. To the right, you will attenuate. To the left, it will attenuvert. You will attenuate and invert. And let me show you what I mean by that. We have a module that's called aVCA from VCV. Right, and I'm going to use the, what shall I use? Let's see, I'm just going to use the envelope for now, right? So I'm going to use an envelope. So this is our original envelope. Have a look on the scope. Right, now I can, if I use aVCA, I can attenuate this envelope, right? So it can open just, let's say, about 50%. This is the pink trace. The blue trace is the original envelope. Maybe I will zoom in a bit. The blue trace is the original envelope. The pink trace is the attenuated envelope. You can see it's not reaching its full potential. Can attenuate it even more. But with an attenuverter, I can also invert the signal. So either, instead of, in this case, going up, it will go down. Have a look. Again, blue trace, original, pink trace, attenuverted. Right, so now it's inverted. We have a mirror of the envelope, right? So instead of going up, it will go down. Instead of going down, it will go up. Right, so we can also invert it. Now, why is it so helpful for us? Because it means that, first of all, I can use this envelope to open the filter. This is the starting point of the filter, of the cutoff point. When I turn it to the right, in this case, because we are using positive voltage, it will be like this knob is moving also to the right. Right, you can hear the filter opens. And this is the second envelope controlling the filter, but we can also invert it, which means that if I turn the cutoff point to the right, this will be the starting point. The attenuverter will go to the left, which means that now the knob will go to the left, right? And we get a different result. Now I'm going to bring it back here. And I'm going to have a quick attack, which means that the filter will open directly. And it will close slowly. Already we have a subtractive voice. Right? Right? Right, so we have a basic subtractive voice. We will continue from here. Don't worry, we are not stopping now. What is the time? Almost an hour already. Wow. Haha. Right, so again, let's recap. We have a voltage controlled oscillator that will generate an oscillation that we can control with voltage. In this case, I'm using pitch information to change the frequency, to change the pitch of the oscillator. Then we have a voltage controlled filter that we are using to subtract harmonic content, to subtract overtones from this sound, from this oscillation, and this is basically subtracting the overtone subtractive synthesis. Then we have an ADSR module, an envelope generator. In this case we have two. We have one to control the filter. Again, it's a voltage controlled filter, and one to control the volume through the VCA. Hey, Raniet. Right, and we have basically a voice. I just need to do this for a second. See you in a second. Cool. All right. Okay, now let's take it another step forward. Usually it's common to see in a subtractive voice or in a subtractive synth some sort, another type of modulation. ADSR and envelope generator is also modulation, but there is another type of modulation, and that is the LFO, which stands for low frequency oscillator. Just like the oscillator, it will also generate oscillations. And LFO is an oscillator like any other. The only thing that it can go, its frequency can go so low that it's not audible anymore. It goes below, let's say 25 or 20 hertz, right? It's not audible, we cannot hear it, but it's perfect to use for moving different things, for adding movement, for adding modulation and whatnot. Right, so let's say that we will use an LFO to control the filter instead of the envelope. So I will use the LFO again from VCV. As you can see, it looks very similar to the VCO, because again, an LFO is an oscillator. Most LFOs will also go to audible ranges, which means that you can also use them as a sound source, because basically as a normal oscillator, right? And we have in this case more or less the same waves. We have a sine wave, right? Yeah, it was the Stranger Things. Right, we have a sine wave, we have a triangle wave, just like the normal oscillator. Again, an LFO, and this is another thing that is important to remember. Just because it's called an LFO doesn't mean you have to use it only for modulation. This LFO, for example, will go up to 1024 Hertz, which is quite high, right? We have middle A, which is 440 usually, and this goes even an octave above. There is drawing LFO. I'm not so sure what you mean. Not so sure. Right, so an LFO is an oscillator like any other. A tremolo in addition to the ADSR. Yeah, we can also do something like this. Yeah, tremolo indeed. Right. Okay, now with an LFO, usually we see also another type of signal, which is the difference between unipolar and bipolar. Unipolar means that the signal exists only on one pole. Usually it's the positive one, but it doesn't matter. As you can see here on the scope, you can see the LFO is not going into the negative range. It goes from 0, in this case, up to 10 volts. But we can also change it to be bipolar, which means that it will go positive and negative as well. So in this case, it will go from -5 to +5. And this is important. For example, and I will show you this with the filter. If I use the same sine wave, let's change the color here to green, because this is modulation. Right, I will go back to unipolar. Right, now I'm using this LFO to modulate the frequency of the filter. Now, because we are using a unipolar signal, again, the cutoff point will be the 0 point, and it will go to the right from there. I can also have it go just to the left by inverting the signal with the attenuverter. Right, but if we are using a bipolar signal, the cutoff point will move in both directions from the 0 point in both directions, right and left. Again, unipolar, bipolar. Right, so this is also something important to understand. I mean, you draw the shape itself. Ah, yeah, there is something from JW, yeah, that you can do this. Weirder stuff. I got it, Jonathan. Weirder stuff. I got it. I just didn't say anything, but I got it. Right? And marvelous things happen when you start modulating things at audio rate. Audio rate means that a frequency that is high enough that we can hear it. It's audible. Right? So we can use an LFO to control the filter, or as someone suggested, who was it that said? ADSR, yeah, Jonathan said we can add tremolo. So I'm going to bring back the envelope for the filter, and what I will do is I will add another VCA, right? I'm not going to speak about this mixer for now, right? I'm going to use another VCA. And this VCA we will use for tremolo. Tremolo basically is variation in amplitude, right, over time. And we can use an LFO for this. Now here again, we are starting to see again the unipolar and bipolar. A VCA usually will work from 0 to 10 volts or from 0 to 8 volts, but it will not react to anything below 0 volts, right? So if I use a bipolar signal that goes to -5, you will see that the VCA will open just until the halfway, and half of the time it will do nothing because it doesn't know what to do with the negative voltage. So we have to change this again to unipolar, and then we have 0 to 10 volts. And now I'm just going to send this voice through the second VCA, right? And now and we have sort of tremolo. Right, now what I want here is this. I want that every time I hit a key, if you are using a sequencer, every new note, the LFO will start the same. So the result will always be the same. Right now, if I hit a note, sometimes the level will be down, sometimes up. And what we can do, we can use the reset input of the LFO, which will reset the LFO with every trigger or with every gate. So I'm just going to use the same gate I'm using from the MIDI module, which means that every new note will reset the LFO. Another thing we can do to add even more variation is modulating or changing the frequency of the LFO with our pitch, which means that every note will have a different rate of the LFO. Now, changing the frequency of something is frequency modulation. So we have two FM inputs. FM stands for frequency modulation. Right, so we can use the pitch information. In this case, it will be a green cable because I'm using it for modulation and not for pitch. Right, and open the attenuator. In this case, we have an attenuator and not an attenuverter like we saw on the filter. And now, lower notes will have a lower frequency and higher notes. Right. And this can get really interesting in polyphonic patches where each voice, and maybe later we will see this, it's a bit more advanced, but each voice has its own LFO frequency, so you get really interesting movement. now we get sort of clicks here because never mind where the LFO is, it will reset back to 0. I want to change it, it will reset to 10 volts. And on this LFO, we have it built in. We have basically an invert button here that I can just invert its phase, which means that now instead of starting at 0, it will start at 10 volts. Right, so now it will be maybe a bit more appropriate. Just a second. Okay. Right. Very cool. Let's use maybe a triangle wave. This with reverb will sound really, really nice. We will add reverb also later, of course, because reverb is life. All right. So now we have an oscillator, we have a filter, we have two envelopes, we have even tremolo. Let's try also vibrato, right? So tremolo is a change of amplitude, vibrato is change in pitch. And first of all, let me go back to the FM input on the oscillator. I told you on this oscillator, the FM input is exactly like the volt per octave input, just with dedicated attenuation, which means that if I open the attenuator all the way, I can use the FM input for my pitch. Just the same, right? Cheers, Willem. I hope they will be helpful. Right, so I can use the FM basically on this oscillator, just like the volt per octave, just with attenuation. Now this attenuation is quite handy because it means that we can add something like vibrato, right? So let me just for a second get rid of the tremolo just so we can concentrate on the vibrato. I'm going to use another LFO. Maybe I will use a smaller LFO, the LFO2, which has control over the shape, so we can morph between the shapes. All the way to the left is sine, then we have triangle, then we have saw, and then we have square all the way to the right. I'm going with a sine wave, right? And tremolo, vibrato, vibrato like on a guitar, like on a violin. Usually it's bipolar, so from the bass pitch, it will move down and up, so it's bipolar. Cheers, Analog Kitchen, right? So I'm going to change this to bipolar. And this will go to the FM input. Again, we want to modulate the frequency, the pitch of the oscillator vibrato. So let's have a listen to this. Right, we want it slightly. Let's change the attack here. We have this movement. And this is thanks to the FM input, right? And an LFO. I think I'm going to leave out this tremolo for now, because now this is the basic patch, right? But there are other things that usually you see on a subtractive synthesis. Game of Thrones. In a subtractive synth or a subtractive voice, and usually you see more than one oscillator, right? You have usually two, even three sometimes. Shlook, even three sometimes. So let's use another oscillator, and we'll just duplicate what we have here. Right, I will just duplicate what we have here, and now we need somehow to mix those oscillators that will go both to the same filter. So I'm going to use the VCV mixer. This basically is a 4-channel VCA. In this case, it will really amplify like we've seen before, but I'm just going to use this as a mixer for now. So I'm going to mix a saw wave with a pulse wave or a square wave, and this will give me the chance to speak about the pulse wave. So if we have a look on the pulse wave, and I call it pulse and I'm going to ask the chat again, chat, please, what is the difference between a pulse wave and a square wave? Because this is also something that is fun to understand or important to understand, right? So we have here, it says here square, I will call it pulse, all square waves are pulse waves, yeah. Right, now let me take this here also. Okay, now a pulse wave has another property that sine waves and triangle waves and sawtooth waves don't have, and this is the pulse width. The distance, right, the time the wave spans in the positive pole in relation to the time it spends in the negative pole. Now when those two are the same, when it spends the same amount of time, I'm still waiting for, I'm already answering, but let me know the difference between a pulse wave and a square wave. I'm waiting. You know what? I go take, I need another bottle of water. Just a second. Got it. Okay, square is always 50-50. Pulse can vary width, square wave had the same length. Very nice. Yes, okay. So when it spans the same amount of time, the same length of time, length of time. In the positive pole, that it spans in the negative pole, it's a square wave, right? It's a perfect square. But then we can change the pulse width. Pulse waves versus square waves, isn't it like tenor versus squares? I'm not so sure, now I'm confused. Right, as soon as I change the pulse width, and you can see now the time it spends in the positive pole is much larger, or it's much longer than the time it spends in the negative pole. And now it's a pulse wave and not a square wave, right? And this has the property that pulse waves have the ability to change the pulse width. And let's have a listen to this also. I'm going to remove the saw. Now it's just a square. Why can I not hear it? Let me see. Because I didn't connect the mix to the filter. Okay. Right? This is a pulse wave with changing the pulse width. Now I'm going to use again the LFO that we have here already to make this movement for me, right? And also here we have attenuation, maybe a bit slower. Right, and let's bring back the saw wave. So now we are mixing two oscillators. And something that's missing, we are not controlling the pitch of the square wave. So let's connect the volt per octave to the pulse wave as well. Right, so now we have two oscillators. Now, something that is always nice is detuning them from one another, even taking one maybe an octave down. So, taking octave up or octave down is always a multiplication of the frequency. If we have a 440 Hertz, we want to go an octave up, we multiply it by 2, we have 880 Hertz. This is an octave up, an octave down is 220, another octave down is 110, another octave down is 55, and so on. Here we have 261, so an octave down from this will be 130.5. Right? Oscillators, one is an octave down. It's not perfectly tuned, which means that there is movement, right? And one is an octave above it. Willem, is this how classic synths were built with these components? Yes, if you look at the Minimoog, for example, it has 3 oscillators, right? That you can change the waveforms. It has a filter. It has 2 envelopes, I believe, right? It has a keyboard, just like I'm using now. Another thing it has is also, hey, VCV rack. Another thing it has also is noise. So we will soon add also noise, right? But yes, basically oscillators, VCAs, filters, envelopes, LFOs, all of these were available also in synthesizers. Also today, if you look at the Behringer Neutron, if you look at Mini Brute, if you look at everything, it's more or less the same. Why not VCA right after VCO and then VCF? So this will change according to the VCA, how it works, and according to the filter, how it works. The relationship between the VCA and the filter. Usually in subtractive synthesizers, what you will see is the filter before the VCA. Now there is another good reason for this, and this is the resonance. If you remember before, I told you about the resonance. It will create a bump. It will create a bump in the cutoff point. Some filters will also what's called self-oscillate. The resonance, the feedback will be so high that it will generate a tone. Now if this tone, you hear it? Right, now if the filter was after the VCA, let's do this. You know what, let me add a filter. If this filter was after the VCA, and I will add another filter here after the VCA. Right, if this filter was after the VCA, we will have a tone even though I'm not hitting anything. Right, so this, one of the reasons is also this. It's not just this. It also depends on the component, on the VCA and the filter, how they are working together, if they are linear or non-linear, and so on and so forth. I saw something in Rec 2, you will be able to type in C2 in the knobs. Yeah, exactly. It will divide them or multiply. What I like about doing it by hand is that it's never perfect, and then you get this nice moving sound. But yeah, you can do this. All right. Water is done. I have a new bottle. Okay, so where were we? We were mixing oscillators, and you were asking about classic synthesizers. So yes, again, oscillators, and another thing is noise. There's another question. Sorry if you said this already. I get a +1 or -1 for the octave. Would this work the same way for the fifth? So if you divide 1 octave by 12, because you have 12 semitones, you will get how much you will need for each semitone, right? I think it's about 0.8, something like this. And then you can calculate. Yeah. Okay. So now another interesting component, another basic building block of subtractive synthesis is noise. Now noise, basically there are a few different types of noise, so-called colors of noise, if you know white noise, pink noise, and so on. So white noise will be basically the brightest. It will have the brightest sound. This is really common to see in synthesizers. Also pink noise is sometimes common. Pink noise will be a bit darker. You can see here that the frequencies, the higher frequencies are a bit more attenuated. Red noise will be even more darker, right? So if we use white noise and we mix in white noise with those two oscillators, we will get even another texture, another, what was it here? Another richness to the sound. nice sound. And we have nothing here. We have just two oscillators, a bit of noise, a filter, and this is already a really nice. So we have again oscillators, we have two oscillators, we have a noise source, we have one filter, we have two envelopes, one for the filter, one for the amplitude, one for the volume. We have an LFO adding a bit of vibrato, and now in this case it's just for the saw wave, so let's duplicate it and add it also for the pulse wave. What was it, about 6%? Is to use noise in other ways, like to control frequency or filter or as FM. Yes, exactly. Now noise you don't necessarily just have to mix in the mixer. We can mix it also in all sorts of different interesting places. Again, just because something says volt per octave or FM or whatever doesn't mean you cannot use noise there. So what we can do is we can, to make this a bit more wobbly instead of an LFO, right, we can use noise through the FM. Right, and let's see what happens now. Let's listen just to the saw wave. But if you do this just a bit, you add this instability, it will drift. Now the pulse wave. We can do the same also for the filter instead of using an envelope. Oh, you know what? Let's do this. Let's use two signals. How we can use, we have one input. How we can use, I want to use the envelope and I want to use also white noise to modulate the filter. How can we do something like this? Two signals for one input. It's a reverb. Yes, indeed. How corrupted are YouTube Live? What do you mean? So how can I almost said the answer, but how can I send two signals into one input? Very simple, but I just, sometimes it's a bit not so obvious. Oh man. Oh man alive. Oh man alive. Na ni na ni na na. And do I get an answer? I didn't understand my question. Okay, I want to send two signals. I want to send white noise and the envelope into the frequency modulation of the filter. I want the filter to open with the envelope, but I also want to send noise to it. How can I send two signals into one input? David. Yeah, that's a simple answer actually, a mixer. Yes, a mixer. All right, so I'm going to use another mixer and I'm going to send the envelope through the mixer. Now there is something you have to keep in mind here. In VCV, it's not such a big deal because In VCV, it's not such a big deal because most mixers will work the same. But in hardware, you have to make sure that your mixer, if you're using hardware, that your mixer is also DC coupled. DC coupled means that it can work with DC signals, direct current signals, slow moving signals like LFOs, like envelopes, like pitch information. Because if you want to mix an envelope with something else, you will need a DC coupled mixer. In hardware, it makes a difference. In VCV, I believe all mixers are DC coupled, so it doesn't really matter. Quick question, what's comparable to maths in VCV? There is Rampage from Befaco. And you can build your own maths with other modules like function generators, attenuators. Everything is available in VCV. Everything is for free also. But if you want something in one module, I will go with Rampage. It's not a perfect math, but I like Rampage more. I have Rampage also in hardware, and it's amazing. Can a group of modules and their settings be saved as a subgroup and used in different projects? Bryant, so first of all, yes, and second of all, yes. So in VCV1, you have the strip module that can help you with this strip from Störmelder that allows you to save a collection of modules, save as, and then you can load them. And in VCV2, it should be possible to select a collection of modules and save them as a collection and then load them in different patches as you wish. So yes and yes, in VCV1 and in VCV2. Okay, so I'm mixing the envelope and I want to mix also white noise. This will be modulation in this case, right? And let's see what happens. So this is the envelope. With noise, listen to the grit. Oh man, if you are with headphones, man, or you have a sub or something. Hey Brian, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Man, this is a great sound. So really less modules. I mean, this LFO and VCA we are not even using. Not so many modules, and you get really fat sound. Even flute-like a bit. If we change again the noise from the FM, we bring it back to vibrato, then we will get even something more like a flute, right? Wow, baked creations, thank you so much. Baked creations. Man, I appreciate it. Thank you. I'm so happy that you find them useful. Really amazing. Cool. Wow. Okay, now there's another thing I want to speak about. Vintage cartoon sound. I want to speak about, and that's the retrigger of the envelopes. Now the envelopes, let me show you this. They have a retrigger function. We have to finish soon, I believe, but we have a bit more time. We all have a retrigger function, which means that as long as the gate is high, remember we spoke about envelope generators and gates. As long as the gate is high, if you hit another note, the envelope will go again to maximum. And let me show you this. I will just disconnect this here. I just want to show you this on the scope because this is also something that is quite useful. You don't see this on many envelope generators. On some synthesizer, it's called legato. So legato is without retrigger, not legato is with retrigger. Right, so I have here the gate going to the envelope. And then let's have a look at the envelope on the scope, right? Now I'm in the sustain stage, right? It will sustain. If I hit another key, nothing will happen. But if I have retrigger connected, again, we have attack, decay, sustain. Now when I hit a key, the envelope will retrigger and will go back to maximum, you see, just like this, which means that now we don't have legato, but we can retrigger the envelope. So let's connect the retrigger to the retrigger of the envelopes, and now I love, noise. Noise is an amazing thing. Right, so we have a basic subtractive voice. We have two oscillators, we have noise, we have a filter, we have a mixer, we have two envelopes, we have a VCA, we have a tremolo if we want. Let's bring back the tremolo, you know what? Let's see what we can do with this, but let's say, okay, let's do this. Let's disconnect the PWM. Sorry, Nick. Right? I'm going to get rid of the reset. Wow. That's a nice sound. Okay, so now let's add reverb. I'm going to use, of course, plateau. I'm going to send the voice to plateau. I'm going to take the wet all the way down for now. And I'm going to use this as a stereo mixer. Let's just take it down by 9 dB because this can get quite hot. Maybe, you know what, maybe even 12 dB. 12 dB. Okay, and now we have individual outputs that I can use for left and right. So we have a stereo signal. The duck is crying more? Which duck, man? What are you talking about? Right, just adding some reverb. I hope you are ready for this because I know I am. That's the best part, right? The reverb is the best part. Okay, let's see this without tremolo. Okay. Oh man. I've been here 15 minutes and it seems great. I'm between learning Ableton Live and have been working on learning the instruments, but feel so tempted to start learning these amazing sounds. Yeah, Rising Star. I think this, especially with VCV also, it's the perfect way to learn synthesis. You don't have to learn modular synthesis. You don't have to learn to create all sorts of complex patches, but learning the basic building blocks, oscillators, VCAs, ADSRs or envelope generators, mixers, filters, is much more in depth with modular, with VCV, especially because it's available just for you to download and to use. And later on, you will also be able to use it in Ableton. So it's a perfect way to learn synthesis in depth. Really, yes. Okay. Hey, Galabor. Hi. Yeah, it's a great sound. Yeah, amazing. Lots of noise, lots of crunchiness. The oscillators are not perfectly in tune. Everything is moving. Yes, indeed. Oh yes, okay. So this was the basics, I guess, right? I hope I didn't do this too quickly, although it's already almost 2 hours that we are here. Polyphony, yes, polyphony is a whole thing about itself. Maybe there will be a part 2 stream of this, right? So I can explore other stuff like sequencing and polyphony, but I think it's enough for today. We got a really interesting, fun sound, right? That is nice in the higher registers. Right? It works also really nicely in lower registers. A bit of distortion we have here. Right, and from here you can take it in all sorts of different directions. I will put the patch also in the description if you want to download it. All 3 modules, mostly VCV, just the reverb is not from there. And yeah. So if you want to download it, you can download it. Again, maybe I will do another one like this. And yes. Okay, great, amazing. Would love to watch you build an Oberheim Prophet 5. Wow. Yes, great. Great. Thank you again so much for joining. I hope this was helpful. If you are watching this after the stream and you have any questions, feel free. You can put them in the comments. You can email me. I will do my best to try and help you out. And that's it. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the weekend. Go make some sounds. Go make some noise. I will see you in the next one, hopefully in the normal time. Right. Thank you again all so much for your support. And yes, Ahmed, this will be available. Yes. Okay. Cheers, everyone. Ciao. Ciao.